right, so again, my name is Skylar Riddle. I'm a certified financial planner here with Fort Pitt Capital Group. Joining me is Mike Anthony. He's a terrific resource for clients of our firm and folks that we like to work with. He's a long-term care and Medicaid expert, so he'll be going over a lot of things with us here today. So a little bit about myself. It's I've been in the business a while, and it's something that I enjoy doing, talking with folks about their finances, their life, their goal. I have 2 kids of my own, so I'm sure they will eventually take some notes on something like this, what to do with mom and dad when we get there. I know I had some questions from my parents and in-laws of, should I be paying attention to this? What are you going to do with me when all this comes down? So it's a very, very timely topic that we have here. A little bit about the what we do here is of course we manage folks' entire financial picture here. We do in-house management of their assets, retirement accounts, personal accounts, 401ks, and really it's a team approach. We want to get to know you as a individual, as a family, as a partner, because we're in this together, and we want you to have a successful career, successful retirement, successful life, and really benefit everything that you are looking to accomplish. And to that end is why we do things like this, why we do these webinars, because we like to say, anytime you do something financially or you have a financial decision, talk to us first, because we have partners like Mike that we can introduce and make sure that you're doing the smart thing. We're not just financial advisors to manage the numbers there. We really want to make sure that you are on the right track for everything. Think of us as life advisors. And this also goes to our financial planning. This is what our firm was founded on, is coming up with holistic, individual, tailored financial plans for folks. So it's very easy to just have an asset manager and that's it. But we focus on a lot of different things, from that to legacy planning, life insurance, and what we're talking here about, which is more on the extended care, long-term care, Medicaid side of business. And it's something for the whole family. We want to make sure that if we are fortunate enough to be working with you, that your parents are taken care of, or your children are taken care of. So there's something in it for everybody to make sure that you're well taken care of, for sure. A little bit of housekeeping on how to interact with us here today. You'll see on your device, you'll be able to tap your screen to ask questions or get the handout. We have a lot of good questions that folks entered prior to this, which is really, really helpful for Mike and I to make sure our topic is covering what you want to hear about. You may see something that you want a little more clarity during the presentation, or you didn't think of to ask earlier. Please go ahead and enter those questions. We will do our best to make sure all the questions are answered, but as you can imagine, this is a very unique type of presentation and plan, and we won't be able to go over every single detail. But someone from either your Fort Pitt team or myself or at the firm will reach out to you to make sure that all of your questions are fully answered. You'll be able to see there on the screen where it says handouts. So you'll be able to see Mike's presentation as well as any other applicable handouts there, and right below questions. So please feel free to ask as many questions as you like. On a computer, it looks just a little bit different than on a tablet or mobile device. So just make sure that you have that. I want to do a shout out to Haley and Miranda, who's behind the scenes. They are on our marketing team here at Fort Pitt. They've done a great job putting this together, and they're still behind the scenes. So if you have any issue, please put a question in about audio, video. They should be able to help you out, and we really appreciate their hard work, because without them, we wouldn't have been able to put this together for you. There's a little arrow there on the desktop to pull up the questions and handouts. So with that, I will introduce Mike Anthony. He's been doing this a very long time. I will let him go into details about himself. I know that he would be able to teach a doctorate program on something like this. So our goal today is to make sure that you are aware of all the opportunities out there and to ask a lot of good questions, get those wheels turning in your head. But please, be mindful. This is something that there's a lot of details, and we want to be respectful of your time here. So you can always talk with us afterwards if there's anything unique to yourself. We're very happy to do that. So with that, Mike, please go ahead and take it away.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and get my screen up here. Make sure it's the right one. Can you see the slide deck?
Yes.
And that's all you see? Good. I've got two screens going. I want to make sure.
Yeah, looks good.
Perfect. Well, first of all, Skylar, thank you so much for the invitation to speak today. I'm really excited about to get into this material. We've got a lot to cover in this short hour that we're together, and I want to leave some time at the end for questions. I don't mind being interrupted with questions too. So if you think of something, I'd much rather catch it right while we're talking about the issue than when we're 6 or 7 issues down the road. So feel free. We can't get into too much detail today. I can sign you all up for my long course, the 9-hour class, and give you a nice discount for it if you want. But no, today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about long-term care planning. Really, what we're doing beyond the ability to insure the risk, and just a little bit about my background. I'm a former delegate to the White House Conference on Aging. I wrote the largest textbook on the subject of long-term care Medicaid planning ever published. It's now in its 4th edition, and it's a beast. It's like 500 plus pages, 1,500 plus citations, the biggest treatise ever written on the subject. And so I lecture on this subject quite frequently, usually once or twice a week lately. So I'm going to give you guys kind of the refined version of my long class, and then I run an education program through Agentis, which handles all of our formal public education. We do continuing legal ed. I'm literally the guy that teaches the lawyers how to do this stuff. And then we also have Medicaid Success Program, which files Medicaid applications in all 50 states and works with folks to help get their cases approved and really protect assets. And last but not least, if you thought you were going to get to meet the bassist for Van Halen today, I play a pretty mean guitar lick, but I'm not that Mike Anthony. I am the other Mike Anthony, which is funny because when people Google me, they say, well, I Google you and all I get is Van Halen stuff coming up. And so I'm like, no, you got to add Medicaid planning to Mike Anthony, and then you get all my scholarly works and articles. So enough about me. Let's jump right into the material. This is a huge issue. And why is it so huge? It's huge for 2 big reasons. Number one is the sheer volume of people that are hitting retirement and then needing long-term care. It's numbers that we've never seen before on planet Earth. And one of the biggest driving factors of that, of course, is the baby boom generation that is reaching retirement. And you would think that, okay, that creates this whole big bubble of folks that are now going through the aging process and needing help. But it's best when you factor in the long life expectancy. So you have a bigger group of people living longer. So it's what I call the good news, bad news problem. The good news is that we're living longer. And the bad news is that we're living longer, right? You're on the earth more years than you expected, and most of those now are in a period where you need some level of long-term care. And so that is massive. And so we see that the risk of needing long-term care is large, and that's applied over a much larger population. Best example I can give you is the 80-year-old gentleman who called me up and he was complaining that he needed to do a Medicaid asset protection plan because his 100-year-old mother just went into a nursing home. Now, when I first started this stuff, 20, plus years ago, it was the 80-year-old going into the nursing home, right? Living to 100 wasn't as common. Now it's, I mean, back when Willard Scott would it was a big deal to announce who turned age 100. But not anymore. It's pretty common. So that is the problem. Now, this would all be great if long-term care was free. And so if long-term care was free, we wouldn't have to have this discussion. The problem is that long-term care is likely to be the single greatest expense in your lifetime. And it is the single largest risk to retirement assets in history. Because the odds of you needing it, if you reach age 65, the odds are that you'll spend at least, that 70% of the people will spend at least a day or more needing long-term care. And of that, 20% are likely to spend 5 or more years in a long-term care facility. Those are just the stats. And most people don't want to ever think it's going to happen to them. But the worry is, well, what if it does? And so today we're going to talk in great detail about how long-term care is financed, because right now in the state of Pennsylvania, the average cost of a nursing home is gone up to $15,000 a month. It's just astronomical. And unless you've got a yacht payment, you're never likely to have like a $15,000 a month reoccurring debt in your lifetime. You didn't even have that when you had a mortgage for your house, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, if you did, God bless you, because you probably don't need this class. But so the thing is this is huge, right? And more people need it, more people are facing it, and then the question becomes, well, how do we guard against the costs? How do we take advantage of the financing systems that are available to us? And I'm going to walk you through that as best I can. But we start with really the concept of funding long-term care in America. It can be broken down into two general categories. You have the private financing and then the public financing. We're going to start by talking about private financing. And we're going to do that only because the public financing really requires that you use your private assets first. And that's what most people don't understand that. They think Medicare and Medicaid are the same in terms of health insurance, and they don't understand that Medicare gives you health insurance for free. Medicaid requires an asset spend down. So we look at using personal savings first or partnering with a long-term care insurance company. And then if we've exhausted those options or taken those options off the table through advanced planning, then we look at what the public options are. And we're going to talk about that and some of the myths in terms of accessing public benefits. So to do that, let's talk about self-insurance using your private assets first, right? Most people are self-insured. They don't have long-term care insurance, which means that their assets are subject to the Medicaid spend down. If you have enough assets to fully self-insure, then you would not be a good candidate to do any planning, right? If you had, say, 4 to 5 million generating maybe enough money that you can pay that $15,000 a month nursing home bill without digging into your pocket too deep, then you are considered fully self-insured. Most people are not, right? We're not Rockefellers or Carnegies, or Gateses or whatever. We're basically in that range of having more than being broke, but not having enough to fully pay for the long-term care. And so the average person is kind of right in that middle zone. What long-term care insurance does is says, you know what, if you're on the hook, if your wallet is really exposed, your retirement assets are exposed to the spend down, maybe what we'll do is we'll partner with an insurance company to take some of that risk. And so long-term care insurance is not health insurance. Now that'll surprise you, right? But it's not health insurance. It's actually asset protection insurance. And I'm not even here to tell you it's a bad deal. It's actually a really good deal if you need it. And if you don't, some of the asset-based long-term care plans that the financial advisors can hook you up with are usually a very good substitute. Where if you need it, great, it's there for you. And if you don't need it, at least you don't lose the value that you paid in the premiums. So that's definitely something Skylar can hook you up with. We're going to talk about the folks that can't get it today. That's really going to be our focus. Is I'm if you have long-term care insurance that pays all of your nursing home expenses, you really don't even need the next 20 slides, right? We're done. Problem solved. It's just that people can't get it or don't get it, and it's two big reasons that we find. Number one is the psychological reason. They just think, I'm never going to need it. It's not going to be me. I'm in the 30%, not the 70%. And it's a very rosy scenario that they have in their own minds, where psychologically they just never see it happening.
Mm-hmm.
For those that overcome that psychological barrier, they realize, oh, I need this. And then they call Skylar up and they say, can you get me connected with a long-term care policy? And he's like, sure. And they do all the forms. And then the insurance company comes back and says, sorry, we're not taking you. And it's like, this is where it's very clear that this is not health insurance, because they can underwrite you and they can exclude you from getting a policy based on any type of pre-existing condition, family history. If you look funny and they think you just might end up in a nursing home, they won't give you the policy. Good luck. So that puts us in a position where if you can't insure it, now your assets are standalone, exposed to the spend out.
And Mike, also to interrupt you there a second, a lot of people it's like you said, I mean, you might just wait a little bit too long. It's for insurance, oftentimes when you need it is when you can't get it.
When most people want it, the day after they've been diagnosed with something that makes them completely ineligible for it.
Yeah, exactly right.
So I focus in on the folks that are past the ability to be able to get long-term care insurance. I encourage you, if you're young enough, healthy enough, get it. A lot of times people will come on these webinars looking for ways to solve problems for their parents who can't get it, but they themselves can. I highly encourage you to take advantage of Skylar and his team's ability to be able to assess your situation for that. But that's not the focus of today's discussion. What we're going to move into is the public financing of long-term care, because if we don't have insurance to back us up, then we have to look to our uncle to help us out, and that would be Uncle Sam. And so Uncle Sam has a handful of programs that are designed to provide payment for care in the long-term care arena. The first is Medicare, and this is one that is very confusing, because Medicare is your health insurance when you reach age 65. You also get it earlier if you meet certain disability conditions. So there are people under 65 on Medicare. Medicare is not long-term care. Medicare has a short-term care provision that allows for Medicare to pay for up to 100 days of skilled care. And you had to have gone to a hospital first, spend at least 2 nights. It's called the 2 midnight rule, where you had to be in the hospital for essentially 3 days. And what you had to do is go from the hospital to the nursing home directly, no going home first. And then you only get the coverage if there is a likelihood of improvement and you're participating in your care treatment plan. If they deem you to be plateaued, leveled off, then they will convert you from being a rehab patient, which is what Medicare pays for, rehab to get you home, and they'll convert you over into being what's called a custodial patient. And custodial patients are private pay until they have spent down enough money to qualify for Medicaid. And most people don't realize that. They go in, have a loved one go into a nursing home. They get the call that says, "Hey, Medicare is not paying anymore. Please write us a check for $15,000. Call Skylar and pull $15,000 out of your accounts to pay for next month and get it reoccurring, because it's going to be every single month." And it's like that hits people like a ton of bricks. And so Medicare is not a long-term care insurance plan. It is there for some short-term stays. It's like for the hip replacement surgery patient. They go into the hospital, do the hip replacement surgery, go to the nursing home. They recoup and recover in that 90 to 100-day window, and then they come back home and then it resets if they've been home for a while. So that is the limited. It usually just buys us as Medicaid planners enough time to get a crisis plan in place to make sure that once we're private pay, we're not spending more money than we have to.
Mhm.
The VA is our second public source of financing, and I'm going to just briefly touch on it today because I know there was a couple questions about it. And the VA has a limited benefit. I call it the drop in the bucket benefit. As we're going to see in a minute, it basically pays out a range of like 1,300 up to about 2,400, which is great if you're paying for home care. If you've got a $15,000 nursing home bill, this is not the place you're going to go to get all of your expenses covered. And then the VA looks at first whether or not you had wartime service for the veteran, and the spouse or widow of the veteran can qualify too. They look to your net worth to see if you're below. They have a bright line net worth requirement that's right around 138,000. Very simple. They tried to make it very similar to Medicaid's top limit. And then they look at your income to see if you have enough care expenses to pay for care. Well, and so these care expenses, if you're paying, so it's crazy. You have to pay for the care first, and then the VA gives you a pension replacement. So you pay out of pocket for care, and then show the VA, and then the VA gives you the aid and attendance benefit, which is it's actually technically a pension. It's called the improved pension, and so we look at that. And we have to, if you're in a nursing home, obviously your care expenses are going to exceed your monthly income. But if you're paying for home care, most people don't write a check for home care every month for the max total of their monthly income, and you have to wipe out your monthly income to get the replacement money from the VA. So it's not a benefit that we use very often. It is available, though, for a limited number of folks, and we usually try to assess that situation. The VA put some stricter rules in place in 2018. They said now they're going to look back 3 years to see if you've transferred or given away any assets, and then they put the bright line asset test in. And so that makes it a lot harder for folks to qualify, because you used to just be able to give away all your assets and get down below the limit, and now you can't do that. So this is for folks that are served during the wartime periods, and that's in the handout that you have if you're wondering if are you in that wartime period. It's very important to understand, though, you didn't have to get shot at. You didn't have to land on Omaha Beach in order to qualify. You just had to be a member of the armed services for 1 day during a declared period of war, 90 days of total service. So even a bunch of the folks that signed right up and then they kicked them right back out, after Germany, surrendered, still we get them qualified because they get their 90 days of total service in. So it's actually interesting. If you had a desk job in Kansas, you can qualify. So you didn't actually it was wartime, you qualified regardless of what the role was. And so this chart is for you. You can see the benefit amounts range from 1,300 up to really 2,400. It's very rare to have two married veterans at the same time both qualify. That's a bit of a unicorn in our business. So, but it's there. We do some analysis for it. We don't use it very often anymore, but it is a public benefit available to you. Now we talk about Medicaid, and long-term care Medicaid is the big kahuna. This is the single largest pay source for long-term care in America. If you add up all the other pay sources, private insurance, Medicare, and VA, you add all of those up together, Medicaid pays more than all of them combined. Medicaid is a public-private partnership in that they say you're on the hook to pay for your own care until you're ostensibly broke, and then we're going to help pick up the tab after you're broke, but we're going to make you pay an ongoing monthly copay that basically wipes out your income. And then it gets even more complicated because they put in place what are called spousal impoverishment rules. And these are rules to help make sure that if you're married, that the healthy spouse is not getting completely wiped out of their finances. And so all of those rules make for a very, very complicated system which also includes a 5-year look back on the transfers of assets in every state except for California, which is still stuck with the 30-month look back period. They're stuck in the 80s basically. And in terms of our what we're going to talk about today, we're going to be primarily focused on Pennsylvania and Pennsylvania rules. But I know a few of you did ask about, is this different in other states? And the answer is kind of yes, it is. There's a little bit of nuance difference, and I'll point a few of those out for you as we go through. In Pennsylvania, one of the key things to understand is that Pennsylvania Medicaid will only pay for nursing homes and home care. It will not cover assisted living like most states do now, which is really horrible because most people don't need to go into the nursing homes if they can be in assisted living, and assisted living's cheaper. But because Medicaid doesn't cover it, it forces a lot more people into nursing homes that don't need to be there. So let's talk about the rules, because what I usually get asked first is which of the assets are automatically protected? And there's generally some understanding about this, but I want to make sure we're going to clarify, and I'm going to give you the actual facts today. So first of all, we have the house. Your primary residence is completely exempt from the Medicaid spend down. If you are married, the value of that house does not matter. If you are single, then you're stuck with this $636,000 equity cap, which is usually good for most folks, right? I don't get into too many cases where we're over the cap if they're not already married. So one vehicle is exempt. The value of the vehicle doesn't matter. A prepaid funeral is exempt. So you can do that one of two ways. You can either go prepay your funeral with the funeral home, or you can do a funeral expense trust, which is an insurance product. And as long as it's irrevocable and below the county limit. Now, Pennsylvania is unique in that most states just have a $15,000 flat limit. In Pennsylvania, you've actually got to be under the county limit, and each county has its own separate limit, which is a little confusing. So personal property is exempt. That's your household goods and furnishings. If you buy your artwork like I do at Bed Bath & Beyond, it's good. If you buy it at the Christie's auction house, on the other hand, that's going to be considered an investment grade personal property, and that would not be exempt. So I'm going to take it all out and go buy, investment grade diamonds. Is not a good plan for Medicaid, right? So the last two things here, qualified assets, and this is one of those very Pennsylvania specific things. In Pennsylvania, if you have IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, any of your qualified retirement assets, they are exempt if they are owned by the healthy spouse. Completely exempt. If they're owned by the institutional spouse, they're still considered fully available for the spend down. If they are owned by a single individual, they're fully available for the spend down. And then lastly, assets that are converted into a special, what we call Medicaid compliant annuity. So don't just rush off and call Skylar and go, put me into one of them Medicaid compliant annuities. No. So Medicaid compliant annuity is like a scalpel. We use it. It's a very precise instrument that is used only after somebody is in a nursing home already. So there's no pre-buying your Medicaid compliant annuities. That doesn't work. They are a way to take assets and turn it into income. And I'll show you a couple ways we use them in a minute. So then, if this is all the stuff that's automatically protected by law, then the question becomes, well, what's exposed to the spend down? And it literally is everything else. Extra real estate, extra vehicles, cash, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, all of it. Cash value life insurance. That's the one that kicks most people. It's like, whoa, they're going to take our life insurance. A lot of times the cash value is a lot less than the death benefit. And they'll force people to drain it out and lose the big death benefit. So IRAs, 401ks, if they're not owned by the community spouse, all of this factors in. Regular old run-of-the-mill annuities are exposed to the spend down. And so it's important to understand when we're talking about the difference. Regular annuities are exposed. Only a very tightly defined Medicaid compliant annuity is protected. So
Mike,
now, yeah, go ahead.
interject there for a second. I know this is more, as you were talking earlier about pre-planning and those sorts of things there. Can you speak just briefly high level about normal trusts, revocable, irrevocable trusts, not so much the Medicaid trust or the funeral trust that you mentioned on the previous slide, but can you talk to that as a planning aspect?
So revocable living trust, which is usually the kind of the stock and trade of most estate planners, is a probate avoidance trust only. Medicaid looks at those trusts as if they're not even in existence, right? It doesn't matter because the person can take all of the assets out and revert them back to themselves. Revocable living trust held assets are considered available resources. What's even worse is that if your house is in the revocable living trust, it loses its exemption from Medicaid. And that's one thing that most people don't understand, and they're very surprised to hear, is that if you put your house in a revocable living trust and then you try to apply for Medicaid, they'll say it's not an excluded asset until you remove it from the trust. And what they're doing there is they're trying to force what's called estate recovery. So Medicaid makes you spend down all of the assets to the limit we're about to talk about, but it lets you keep some assets. And then it's even more vicious than that. They come after you after you're dead, and they want the assets they let you keep to refund the money they've spent on your care. So part of our planning process is not only to help people navigate the spend down in the most cost-effective way possible, but also to make sure that the house or whatever assets they retained are not exposed to the estate recovery after their death. So great question. Here's the basic rundown of the Medicaid eligibility rules. First, you have single individuals would have to spend down to $2,400 in Pennsylvania. Now that's a little bit higher than the national average, which is $2,000. Most states have the $2,000 limit. In Pennsylvania, if you have low income, meaning income less than the 2523 standard, then you can also disregard a total of up to $8,000 worth of assets. Okay, so 2,000, 8,000 still isn't a lot of money, right? If you've got $100,000, you basically have to spend down $92,000 to qualify for help from Medicaid. So at $15,000 a month, you'd be broke pretty fast. So the types of planning that we're talking about, especially the crisis planning, doesn't involve having to wait out the 5-year look back. We're going to be talking about strategies that you can use even today. If you've got a loved one that is currently in a nursing home spending their money, it's still not too late to plan. And that's a real surprise for most people because when we talk about the 5-year look back in a second, they think that you had to do all your planning 5 years before you went in, or you're up the creek without a paddle. And then today I'm going to shed some light that we have options for you. So if you're married, now here's where it gets a little crazy. If you have two people in at the same time, they both can exclude the 8,000. But then if you have one person that needs care, and this works for home care and nursing home care, if you have one person that needs care and one that doesn't, the healthy spouse is known as the community spouse, and then they get to keep a certain amount of money automatically from the spend down. But it's a formula. 1/2 of the assets on the snapshot date with a maximum and minimum. And I'm going to give you an example of this on our next slide. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it here. The last thing is that if we have 5 years and it's 5 years from the date you apply for Medicaid. So they go back 5 years to see how much money you've given away, transferred. Can be sweetheart sales, can be adding somebody on a deed for property, lots of different ways they count it as a transfer. And then they add it all up, divide by the average cost of care in the state. So I've given you some regional averages here. See, Pennsylvania is the most expensive, and that's crazy. So they divide the amount that you've given away by the average cost of care per month, and then that becomes a prospective penalty. And I'm going to give you an example on that too. So let's cover our two
Mike,
examples.
while you go into that, I just briefly, before we get too far, want to touch on irrevocable trust. Obviously, there are cons to that, as you know, in its name, what you put in there is something you cannot back out, like you were mentioning to revocable there. Are those assets, if you set up a irrevocable trust prior to the 5-year look back and you have assets or land or property in there, is that exempt from the spend down?
It is, and we refer to those in our trade as a asset preservation trust, or MAPT. And that is a special type of irrevocable trust where you're able to take assets, put it in the trust, and then you start the clock ticking. So when we get into strategies in a minute, I'm going to talk about the gift and wait strategy. Most people, when they're doing the gift and wait strategy, utilize a trust as the depository for the assets to hold on to them, which is great. It works for non-qualified assets only. You can't take your IRA and put it into an irrevocable trust. But hold that thought, because we will get. I'm about 3 or 4 slides away. You're right on track. So our maritals. Before we get there, let's just talk about the marital spend down, because this is what confuses a lot of people. They're like, 1/2 of the assets. There's a limit. What does that mean? And so we have what's called a snapshot date. That is the date the person went into the hospital or the nursing home that started their first 30 days of continuous care. If you didn't go into a hospital or nursing home and you applied for home care, it's the date you applied the first time. So the first application for home care becomes your snapshot date, becomes your assessment date. They add up all of the assets owned by both couples, or both people in the couple, right? So it can be husbands, wives, because after Obergefell passed through the Supreme Court, it now applies to same-sex couples as well. So it can be his and his, right? It doesn't matter. It just is part of the marital ownership. So it can be yours, your spouse's, or your spouse's with someone else. And that scares a lot of people too, because Medicaid does not care if you have a prenup. So if you go into a marriage and you say, mine is mine and yours is yours, and maybe here's our little $10,000 checking account together to cover expenses, and we're going to just keep things separate, Medicaid says, I don't care. We're going to take all of it and count it towards the spend down. And that's why you have the largest number of 80-year-olds shacking up in history. It's because people they're resistant to remarriage because of the fact that they don't want to expose themselves to their potential spouse's spend down. And that is such a crazy thing that we see on a regular basis. So just to give you this quick example in our slide deck here, if you have 300,000 in assets and you divide it by 2, it'd be 150, 150. But that doesn't work because we've hit the cap. So in this case, if you have 300,000, you would have 162,000 that this couple would have to spend down on care, which would take them about 10 months to do it, right? And that's when they would become Medicaid eligible. If they had only 200,000, then it's 50-50. So they would have to spend 100 and can protect 100. 40,000, 2020 doesn't work because you've hit the lower limit of 26,076, right? So that is your lower limit. So your spend down is going to be just the differential between the lower limit and what you've got, as long as you're under double the lower limit in your total assets on the snapshot. This is why when we talk about Medicaid compliant annuities, it is the biggest way to solve the problem here. We will discuss momentarily. You take the 300,000, you have to spend 162 down. You'll take that money and put it into an annuity for the healthy spouse. I'm getting ahead of myself, but the point I want to mention here is that you don't buy the annuity until after the snapshot date is set, because you still have to have all of that money on the snapshot in order to get the max 137 for the healthy spouse. And that's why pre-purchasing the annuities is never a good idea. And so there's never a pre-planning option where the annuity purchase makes sense. You always do it in states like Pennsylvania where they do this one half thing. You got to do it after the snapshot date's been set. There was a lot of questions on gifting. Let's talk about gifting real quick here. Transfers are all sorts of things, giving away assets, changing asset titles, adding joint owners, which gives them an equity stake, whatever it is. Medicaid goes back 60 months. Now, here's the thing that most people get surprised about is that they have your financial advisor. It won't be any of the Fort Pitt guys because they know this stuff, but yeah, your run-of-the-mill financial advisor will tell you you can give away 10, now 15, 16, I think it's up to, is it 17 now? I lose track. But you can give away lots of thousands of dollars, right? $16,000, $17,000 per person per year and not trigger the gift tax. But now, what they won't tell you is that it really doesn't matter unless you're gifting about 11 million. So that usually doesn't apply because, most people that we work with are never that wealthy. But here's the thing. If you have that misunderstanding and you think you can give away money to your kids and grandkids, and a lot of seniors have that misunderstanding, and they got it from their not so bright financial advisors, what ends up happening is they gift away money and think that they won't have a Medicaid penalty. So I give you the example here of Mary. Mary, she's dutifully gifting her $10,000. She remembers when her financial advisor told her she could give $10,000 per person per year. And so that's stuck in her head. And she gifts in 2017, 18, 19, and 20, $10,000 to each of her 3 grandkids. In 2022, she goes into a nursing home. She spends all the rest of her assets down to the $8,000 limit and applies for Medicaid. And Medicaid, to her surprise, says, wait a second, you've given away over the last 5 years a total of $120,000 worth of assets. And so Medicaid has a penalty. It's very similar to hockey. So hockey, the way when you get in penalty, they put you in the penalty box and you're basically taken out of the game. Medicaid is the same thing. Medicaid has a penalty period. That's when you're in the penalty box. And in Mary's case, she would be in the penalty box for 8 months because of the amount of money that she gave away. So she's broke. She's in the nursing home. They're charging her $15,000 a month, and she's got no money to pay. And Medicaid won't cover her for 8 months. This is a very dire circumstance. And one of the reasons why, if there's nothing more that I teach you today, it's just don't give away money or don't give away assets unless it's part of a well thought out plan. We do a lot of gifting in our Medicaid plans, as I'll show you momentarily, but it is part of a strategic plan and not just willy-nilly like Mary here, because then you're going to end up in a lot of trouble. And Medicaid won't let you use the undue hardship waiver to wipe away that penalty unless you can show that you've tried to get all the money back from your grandkids. Imagine having to sue your grandkids for cash just to get Medicaid to pay your bill. It's a mess. We don't like those messes. We like to clean those messes up.
Absolutely, Mike. I know we've got about 16 minutes. A real quick question I think you can touch on is just some clarification on what the home care application is. What that actually is applying for what you're talking about, Medicaid and getting into a home.
The nice thing is Medicaid will cover, Medicaid and the Life program, which is technically not Medicaid, but they both cover home care. And home care is it literally, if you apply and you get approved for it, then Medicaid will provide you, or the Life program will provide you actual home care folks that come into the house from an agency, and the state picks up the full tab. There's actually no copays in Pennsylvania for home care if you qualify. So that is definitely a very good program, and you can even set it up to pay a family member. So you can even actually enroll that family member with the home care agency. The home care agency that's qualified under Medicaid pays the family member, and the family member provides the care. which is, if you're eligible or can become eligible for it, can be a very good way to age in place.
Yep.
So before I open it up for questions, I'm going to just wrap up with our top 4 strategies, and I've already alluded to most of them, so I'm just gonna clarify them for you. Again, this is much like they tell the folks before they see Evel Knievel do a stunt. Do not try this at home. This is a very short version of the explanation. So the first one is what we call the plan ahead strategy. This is usually the first thing that we do with folks that are denied long-term care insurance, is we look to see what assets we can gift and wait. And what we're doing is we're either gifting, you can gift to a person or you can gift to a trust. We use those Medicaid asset preservation trusts. It's a very specialized trust just for this type of gifting. And what that does is it creates a firewall between you and your assets, or the cost of your long-term care and your assets. The problem is that you have to wait 60 months from when the trust is funded or for when the gift is given before you can access Medicaid. So if you know early on that you can't protect yourself from long-term care insurance, but you're not in need of care today, that you're likely to have a few years to wait out this look-back period, you take the look-back period and turn it into a waiting period. And then if you do this and you also happen to be a veteran, because remember, the VA has a 3-year waiting period, Medicaid a 5, right? So we leverage that, and we might get some VA coverage for year 4 and 5 of the 5-year waiting period for Medicaid. So even if your health does take a little bit of a dip and you need some help, you can access VA before you can get Medicaid. So that is a huge, very popular strategy. Again, you can't put qualified assets in, so that becomes problematic. And a lot of times when we're planning ahead with qualified assets, what we might do is accelerate the spend down. So one of the things that we do is we try to pay family members wherever possible for care. Biggest mistake most people make is paying a family member without a caregiver contract. If you pay a family member for helping out without a caregiver contract, Medicaid will look at the payments as gifts. So in order to wash that away and make it so that they treat it like any other fair market value payment, we have to do a family caregiver agreement. And we'll do these family caregiver agreements and then max them out. Pay max hourly rate to max hours as a way to wash the funds over to the family member. And we'll use those as an effective way to compensate them for basically the stuff that they're usually doing and not charging you for. It is considered income to the caregiver, to the child or grandchild who's providing the care. But if they have to pay taxes on it, that's a much better than having to spend it all down and losing it. So our last 2 strategies are what I call crisis strategies. These are strategies if you say, you know what, Mike, we've got my husband's in the nursing home, my dad's in the nursing home. Whether they are married or single, we have 2 different crisis strategies that are very effective. The first one is for married couples, and this does involve the use of, we did the math, right? 300,000, we have to spend down 162. We literally can take 162,000, place it in a Medicaid compliant annuity for the healthy spouse, and then 2 things happen. Number 1, the spouse in the nursing home becomes immediately eligible for Medicaid. And number 2, the healthy spouse can have an unlimited income and it doesn't impact the copay. The other thing about that is really cool is that there's only one spend down for a married couple. And that one spend down is it's a one-time thing. So you only have to get below the 137,400 or whatever your personal limit is one time and apply. The healthy spouse could win the lottery afterwards and it wouldn't matter. The healthy spouse can get $10,000 a month back from their Medicaid compliant annuity and put it right back in their investments at Fort Pitt, and it's good. That won't disqualify the spouse from long-term care, and so that's a super effective way to protect assets for the healthy spouse. If you're single and you're not lucky enough to have the healthy spouse's asset protection rules, then we're stuck doing what we call a half a loaf plan. And it's based on the old concept that a half a loaf is better than no loaf at all. And what we do is we take and we actually gift away half of the assets right away, right now. And we apply for Medicaid. And Medicaid says, up, you're going to have a penalty. And we say, yep, please give it to us. Because we took the other half of the assets and we bought a short-term Medicaid compliant annuity. And if we know we're getting a 10-month penalty, we buy a 10-month annuity. Most insurance agents don't even realize you can buy annuities for terms as short as 2 months. But we design it specifically to match the penalty so that the two overlap. And what ends up happening is we apply for Medicaid. Medicaid says the next 10 months you're ineligible, and we say, great. Month 1, they get their Social Security check and their pension check and their big fat Medicaid compliant annuity check, and they pay full price for the nursing home. And they do that through months 1 through 10. After month 10, the annuity has run out, the penalty has run out, and Medicaid will continue to pay for care going forward. That gives us usually the ability to protect at least 50% of the assets. So anybody in a nursing home today, I can either protect 50 all the way up to 100% of the assets, depending on their marital status. And so that is, it is complex. And one of the reasons why you should really only do this with somebody who is a certified Medicaid planner. Our firm, only deals with the certified Medicaid planners in terms of being able to do this type of planning for you. And we'll just wrap it up there. I'm really happy that the Goldblum Soblowski firm asked me to do this, and that Fort Pitt has hosted this. Skylar, I'm going to turn it back to you. I think we've got enough time for some questions. And if you guys have any questions, type them in. I'll try and knock a few out of the park. And if you don't, one of the things that Skylar and his team will do is they will do some fact finding with you, get your questions from you. And if there's something that needs our attention, they'll get you to the right spot. So if we can't cover it all in the next 10 minutes, and I know your head's probably spinning, right? Because I just opened it up and dumped a bunch of Medicaid facts in there. But anyway, Skylar, thanks again for the opportunity.
Absolutely, Mike. It's great to have someone like yourself on who is an expert, because we have questions like this all the time. And we know enough to discuss it during the planning process, but we don't know all of the ins and outs. And that's why we love to partner with you and law firms like Goldblum Soblowski as well, to make sure that everybody's taken care of. In planning, we always say it's never too late, but it's better if you start early, and it goes just as well with this. I mean, the earlier you plan, the more options you have. But the great news that I took away from this is, no matter what stage you're in, there's always, I should say, there's almost always something that you can do to make sure to protect it. So if you're already in a facility.
Sorry to interrupt you, Skylar, but
No,
my
please.
motto on that point, my motto is, if you still have money left to spend down, you still have an opportunity to protect it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think that's great. There's a couple questions, and please, folks, enter questions into the chat here. We'll answer as many as we can in the next few minutes. There's a few that I have from the initial and that I came up with as well. Like you said earlier, we have a lot of children who are on this, who maybe their parents are in their 80s, 90s, 100, and they're thinking of this. And there's a concern that in Pennsylvania, a lot of times, the children feel responsible to have to pay, or will be required to pay for their parents to go into a facility. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's called what we refer to that as the filial responsibility rule. Mm-hmm. And this is one of the reasons why you really should seek out guidance in this area, because our Medicaid eligibility strategies get the person on Medicaid, so they're either private pay or Medicaid, and do so in a very efficient way that alleviates the children from any filial responsibility. So there's no point at which where you say, all right, we got mom on Medicaid, now Medicaid's going to come back after me. Mm-hmm. They don't do that. It's only when you're responsible for making sure the bills are paid and you don't do it that they will come after you. And so by planning with us and by using our service to make sure your Medicaid application gets approved properly, that is one of the ways to avoid your personal liability under that.
So just to follow up on that, if somebody is, say, a power of attorney on their parents, are they more at risk than just someone who is helping out mom or dad pay the bills, but are not in an official capacity?
Not that much more at risk. The filial responsibility, it looks to see whether or not you have authority, also looks to see if you're an active part of their lives. And really the key is whether you were not diligent in getting public benefits approved when they could have been or should have been. And that's one of the things, and people just, they don't recognize that that's an issue. They don't understand the Medicaid application system. They don't understand that if you don't give them the stuff they ask for in 10 days, they're going to deny your application. There's a lot of problems that you have. That's why you really should have a professional guide you through it. I always say, even if you don't have any assets to protect and you're spending down money in a nursing home, spend your last $5,000 paying somebody to handle the Medicaid application, right? Because when it's going to go to the nursing home or to somebody to help you, you want somebody in your corner, and an advocate through that process is essential, because it's a difficult bureaucracy to deal with.
Absolutely. No, thanks for clearing that up a little bit. Another one that we get asked all the time, we did a webinar last year about what happens to your money when you die. And I guess this could have been titled, "What happens to your money if you're still alive but going to a home or need some assistance there." We get asked a lot about titling your house and the pros and cons of just transferring it to a child to get it out of your name. And a lot that you talked about is, your home is oftentimes exempt from the spend down, that you don't necessarily have to sell your home or give your home away to a kid. Is that correct?
Right. It kind of partly. So one of the things that we look at is, what is the exposure on the back end, right? If the house is protected from Medicaid, we're not too worried on the application. We're worried about what the consequences are on the back end. And so that is one of the reasons why we will often do something, and this is a kind of one of our real tricks up our sleeve. It's called the 1% deed. In Pennsylvania, they only recover from the probate estate. That means you die, the house is in your name. But if you give the whole house away, they'll penalize you for the whole value of the house. So what we do is we sliver off 1% and give that away to the person that you want to inherit the house. And then we take the penalty, right? If it's a $400,000 house and I gave away 1%, it's only a $4,000 penalty. We can survive that. That's like, 10 days care costs that you might have to pay for, right? So that's not a big deal. But what happens is the 1% holder has with rights to survivor. So that means when the 99% holder dies, everything goes to the 1% holder without probate and avoids estate recovery. So we're again, don't just rush out and buy a 1% deed. It is definitely something that you utilize in the moment as part of a coordinated plan.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And you keep coming back to make sure you plan ahead, and whatever stage that is, don't rush into it on your own. There are folks out there who can help. With that being said, it looks like I don't have any other additional that came in. Haley, if you would be so kind to get my presentation up, I will go over the last little bit of information here. It's been great. This is a very well attended webinar. We had a lot of questions. We do have some coming up, and the next one, is a good piggyback on this: how to use insurance to protect your family's financial future. So you mentioned at the top that if you're young enough, there is an opportunity to do it. This was geared towards what our options are there that are not insurance related. So this will talk about insurance there. And then for business owners, is an ESOP right for your business? So those are a couple that are coming up in the near term there. You know, we really appreciate everything that you have. If you have some questions that were not answered, if you work with one of us here at Fort Pitt, we will absolutely reach out. If you are not working with us yet, we'll be happy to reach out, answer any questions, get you in touch with the right person to make sure that you're well taken care of. Make sure that you are taken care of, your parents are taken care of, everybody that is important to you, we want to make sure is all set there. And then lastly, there are just some of our information about the firm. So we're right at 1:30. Thanks everyone. Mike, it was great chatting with you, and I'm sure we'll be doing this again. Thank you very much.
Take care. Thanks, folks.
All right, thanks everyone. And with that, we'll conclude the webinar here.